My name is Evelyn Foster, and I'm 32 years old. Last month at my cousin's wedding, my father did something that made 200 guests hold their breath, and he had no idea he'd just dug his own professional grave. You see, my father always believed success meant a corner office and a six-figure salary. What he never understood was that sometimes the most powerful people in the room are the ones you'd least expect. Before I share what happened that night, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this story. I love hearing from viewers around the world, so drop a comment with your location and local time. It's amazing how universal these family dynamics can be. Now let me take you back to that elegant ballroom at the Ritz-Carlton, where crystal chandeliers cast shadows on what would become the most revealing night of my father's life. The wedding that changed everything started like any other family gathering, with comparisons, judgments, and my father's disappointment in his younger daughter. But this time, things would end very differently. The Harrison-Mitchell wedding was the social event of the season. James Harrison, son of tech mogul CEO William Harrison, was marrying Sarah Mitchell in front of 200 carefully selected guests. The ballroom sparkled with golden accents and white orchids that probably cost more than my monthly salary. And yes, I was a teacher, a fact my father would make painfully clear to everyone that night. I arrived early, wearing my best navy dress, simple but elegant. My sister Victoria swept in wearing designer everything, her husband trailing behind checking his phone. She was the star, after all, the successful one, the lawyer who'd made partner at 33. Evelyn, darling, my mother air-kissed my cheek. You look nice. Victoria, doesn't your sister look nice? Victoria squeezed my hand. You look beautiful, Maddie. My father appeared, already working the room with his networking smile. Robert Foster, Deputy CFO of Harrison Technologies, in his element among the corporate elite. He spotted us and his expression shifted, pride when he looked at Victoria, something else when his eyes landed on me. Girls come, the Weathertons want to say hello. The Weathertons owned a chain of private schools. This should be interesting. Robert, these must be your daughters, Mrs. Weatherton gushed. My father's chest puffed out. Yes, this is Victoria. She just made partner at Brennan and Associates. Corporate law, you know. Very prestigious. How wonderful. Mr. Weatherton shook Victoria's hand enthusiastically. And this is Evelyn. My father's voice dropped a notch. She teaches. The pause that followed felt eternal. Oh. Mrs. Weatherton's smile faltered. That's nice. What grade? High school mathematics, I said. Bless her heart, my father added with a sigh that carried across the conversation circle. Someone has to do it, right? Not everyone can be a Victoria. The Weathertons exchanged uncomfortable glances. I kept my expression neutral, a skill I'd perfected over years of parent-teacher conferences with difficult families. If you'll excuse me, I said quietly. I walked toward the seating chart, finding my name at table 12, near the kitchen doors, practically in a different zip code from the main table where my parents and Victoria would sit. Table 2, close enough to smell the bride's bouquet. Evelyn Foster? I turned to find Mrs. Harrison, the mother of the groom, studying me with interest. Yes, Mrs. Harrison. She smiled, not the pitying smile I'd grown accustomed to, but something else. James has told me so much about you. Before I could respond, the cocktail hour ended and we were ushered to our seats. My father had found his stage. During the salad course, I watched him work table 2, his voice carrying. Victoria's billable hours are insane, the firm's youngest partner in a decade. He glanced toward table 12. Evelyn's over there. She teaches. Public school. It's honest work, I suppose. At least you have one success story, someone said. My father laughed. Can't win them all, right? The words stung, but I'd heard worse. I focused on my salad, counting cherry tomatoes like they were particularly fascinating. You okay? Asked my table companion, an elderly woman named Mrs. Chen. Perfect, I lied. The reception continued, and my father found more opportunities to highlight the contrast between his daughters. During his toast, oh yes, he gave a toast, he managed to work in references to Victoria's Harvard Law degree, her six-figure bonus, and her upcoming wedding to an investment banker. As for Evelyn, he said, finding me in the crowd, well, she's always been our little dreamer. Teaching high school? Bless her heart. Not everyone's cut out for the corporate world. 200 people turned to look at me with varying degrees of pity. That's when I noticed something interesting. James, the groom, wasn't looking at me with pity. He was looking at my father with something close to disbelief. He whispered urgently to his father, who was seated at the head table. William Harrison, CEO of the company where my father worked, slowly turned his gaze from his son to my father, then to me. His expression was unreadable, but I saw him reach into his jacket pocket, pulling out what looked like an envelope. "Interesting toast, Robert," Mr. Harrison said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. My father beamed, mistaking the comment for approval. I should have left then, slipped out during the cake cutting, made my excuses. But something made me stay. Maybe it was the way James kept glancing at me with gratitude. Maybe it was the envelope Mr. Harrison kept tapping against his palm. Or maybe, after 32 years of being the family disappointment, I was finally tired of leaving rooms where I had every right to be. The wedding reception rolled on, and my position in the family hierarchy became increasingly clear. Table 12 wasn't just far from the action, it was practically in another venue. I sat with Mrs. Chen, two cousins from my mother's side who spent the entire time on Instagram, and a couple who turned out to be last-minute additions when other guests canceled. "So you're Robert's other daughter," Mrs. Chen said, not unkindly. "The teacher," I confirmed. "My grandson had the most wonderful math teacher," she began, but was cut off by the sound system crackling to life. "Ladies and gentlemen," my father had somehow gotten hold of the microphone again. "I just wanted to share something about raising children in today's economy. Oh no. My wife and I invested heavily in both our daughters' educations." He found Victoria in the crowd, gesturing grandly. Victoria took that investment and multiplied it. Harvard Law, top of her class, now pulling in mid-six figures at 33. Applause scattered through the room. Victoria looked uncomfortable. "And Evelyn?" He found me again, his smile turning rueful. "Well, we invested the same amount. Private schools, tutors, every opportunity. But she chose teaching." He shrugged theatrically. "What can you do? Not everyone has that killer instinct." "Unbelievable," Mrs. Chen muttered beside me. A man at a nearby table stage whispered to his wife. "That's harsh." My father continued, warming to his theme. "The return on investment, as we say in finance, varies greatly. Victoria's already paid back her education costs through the family's increased social standing. Evelyn, well, teachers do important work. Someone has to, right?" I stood up, needing air. Victoria caught my movement and started to rise, but I shook my head slightly. This wasn't her battle. In the hallway outside the ballroom, I leaned against the cool marble wall and practiced my breathing exercises, the same ones I used before parent conferences with helicopter parents. "Miss Foster?" I opened my eyes to find Mrs. Harrison standing there, elegant in champagne silk. "I needed a moment," I said. "I imagine you did." She studied me with those sharp eyes that had built a tech empire alongside her husband. "Your father doesn't know, does he?" "Know what?" "About you and James. About what you did for our son." I chose my words carefully. "I'm just a teacher, Mrs. Harrison. Your son was a student at Lincoln High years ago. That's all." She laughed, actually laughed. "Just a teacher? My dear, you have no idea what William is about to do you?" "I don't understand." "James failed 8th grade math. Did you know that? We hired 12 tutors. 12! He fired them all. Then you came along." "Mrs. Harrison, 5 years. You worked with him for 5 years. Unpaid for the first two because you said, and I quote, 'No child should fail because their brain works differently.'" You taught him on weekends, evenings, summer breaks. You rewrote entire curriculum just for him. He needed help. That's what teachers do. That's what you do. And tonight, my husband is going to make sure everyone knows it. She returned to the ballroom, leaving me in the hallway with my racing thoughts. I hadn't wanted recognition. That wasn't why I'd helped James. But standing there, hearing my father's voice still echoing from the reception, I wondered if maybe it was time for the truth. When I returned to table 12, the energy in the room had shifted. My father was back at table 2, but now people were whispering, glancing between him and the head table where Mr. Harrison sat, that envelope now placed prominently in front of him. "Where did you go?" Mrs. Chen asked. "Just needed air." "You missed your father's analysis of career choices. Apparently, teachers lack ambition and business acumen." "Sounds about right." James and his new bride were making rounds, thanking guests. When they reached table 12, James broke protocol and hugged me. Not an air kiss or handshake, but a real hug. "Miss Foster," he said, loud enough for surrounding tables to hear. "Thank you for coming. It means everything." Sarah, his bride, whom I'd never met, took my hands. "James talks about you all the time. You changed his life." My father, 3 tables away, was straining to hear. "Congratulations to you both," I said simply. James leaned closer. "Dad's going to speak soon. Please don't leave." They moved on, but the damage was done. The whispers spread like wildfire. "The foster girl knows the groom?" "He hugged her like family." "Changed his life?" My father appeared at my table, his face tight. "Evelyn, what was that about?" "Congratulating the happy couple." "You know James Harrison? Why didn't you tell me?" "You never asked, Dad. You were too busy explaining my failures." He opened his mouth to respond, but the sound system crackled again. This time, it was William Harrison standing at the microphone, that envelope in his hand. Mr. Harrison's presence at the microphone commanded instant attention. The room fell silent except for the soft clink of champagne glasses being set down. My father quickly returned to his seat, straightening his tie. "Before we continue celebrating," Mr. Harrison began, his CEO voice filling the ballroom, "I need to address something I just heard." My stomach tightened. This was it, the moment where I could either let the truth emerge or stay silent forever. But what would silence cost me? I thought about next month's faculty meeting, where my principal would inevitably ask why I didn't leverage my connection to the Harrison family for school funding. I thought about future family gatherings where my father would continue his performance, each time chipping away at my professional dignity. I thought about my students, who deserved a teacher who stood tall, not one who shrank in shadows. The cost of silence was becoming too high. "Robert Foster," Mr. Harrison continued, "just gave us his perspective on investments and returns. As a businessman myself, I appreciate that lens. But I wonder if he's calculated all the variables." My father sat straighter, pleased to be mentioned by his CEO. 5 years ago, I'd made a choice. James Harrison had been on the verge of dropping out. Not because he wasn't brilliant, he was. But his brain processed numbers differently, and no one had taken the time to understand how. I'd spent 2 years teaching him for free, creating visual mathematics models, turning equations into stories his mind could grasp. The next 3 years, even after he'd moved on to high school, then college, I'd continued tutoring him through calculus, statistics, even the quantitative sections of his LSAT. If people knew this, everything would change. The dynamic at every family gathering, my father's entire narrative about his failed investment, my carefully maintained privacy. But if I stayed silent, I'd remain the family disappointment forever. The one who lacked ambition. The one who needed her successful sister to take care of her. "You see," Mr. Harrison said, that envelope still prominent in his hand, "some investments aren't immediately visible on a balance sheet." I caught Victoria's eye across the room. She knew something was coming. She always could read a room like a legal document. She gave me the smallest nod. Permission? Encouragement? Both? My phone buzzed with a text from James. You deserve this. Deserve what? Recognition I'd never asked for? My father's embarrassment? Or simply the truth? Evelyn, Mrs. Chen whispered beside me. You're shaking. I was, because I realized that staying silent wasn't just about protecting my privacy anymore. It was about accepting my father's version of my worth. It was about agreeing that teaching was somehow less than corporate law, that changing lives mattered less than billable hours. Some of you may not know, Mr. Harrison continued, his gaze finding me at table 12, that my son James struggled academically in his youth. The room tensed. This wasn't typical wedding speech territory. We hired the best tutors money could buy. Specialists from Yale, Princeton, MIT, none of them could reach him. He paused, letting that sink in. He was failing 8th grade. We were considering alternative schools, the kind for students who can't make it in traditional settings. My father's expression had changed from pleased to confused. Where was this going? Then we found someone who saw James not as a problem to solve, but as a brilliant mind that simply worked differently. Someone who refused payment for 2 years because, and I quote, no child should be priced out of understanding their own potential. The envelope in his hand, I suddenly knew what it contained. The thank you letter James had written after getting his Harvard Law acceptance. The one where he'd detailed every single way I'd changed his trajectory. I'd told him to throw it away, that teachers didn't need thank you letters. He'd promised he had. He'd lied. That person, Mr. Harrison said, now looking directly at my father, is sitting at table 12, banished to the back of the room, despite being the reason we're celebrating a wedding between two lawyers today instead of a very different story. 200 heads turned toward me. The weight of their stares was overwhelming, but not as heavy as the weight of silence I'd been carrying. My father's face had gone pale. He was doing the math now. All those times I'd been just tutoring some kid on weekends. All those evenings I'd missed family dinners for work stuff. All those summers I'd spent teaching summer school, when really I was getting James through advanced placement courses. But Robert thinks teachers lack ambition, Mr. Harrison said, his voice carrying an edge now. That they're failed investments. That they need to be taken care of by their more successful siblings. The room was so quiet, I could hear my own heartbeat. This was my moment. I could stand up, stop this, preserve my father's dignity and my privacy, or I could let the truth finish what it had started. I remained seated, my hands steady on the table. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. Have you ever been undervalued for your career choice? I know that sting all too well. Drop a comment and let me know what you do for work. I read every single one. Teachers, social workers, artists, caregivers, all of you who've been told you're just anything. This story is for you. If it's resonating with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear that their work matters. Your support helps these stories reach the people who need them most. Now let's get back to that ballroom where everything was about to change. Mr. Harrison stepped away from the microphone, but the tension in the room crackled like electricity. My father stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. William, I think there's been a misunderstanding, he said, his corporate smile strained. Is there? Mr. Harrison's voice was calm but carried across the silent ballroom. Then let's clear it up. Evelyn does tutoring, yes. A little side work. A little side work? James stood up at the head table. Dad, may I? Mr. Harrison nodded, and James approached the microphone. My heart raced. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not like this. Mr. Foster, James said, addressing my father directly, do you know what your daughter charges for tutoring? I imagine the going rate. 0. For the first 2 years, 0. Gasps rippled through the crowd. She taught me every Saturday for 6 hours, Sundays too, during exam season. That's very generous of her, but I wasn't finished. James's voice was steady, lawyerly. Do you know why I needed a tutor? My father shifted uncomfortably. Learning difficulties? I have dyscalculia. Numbers literally scramble in my brain. The room was riveted. This wasn't typical wedding reception conversation. 12 tutors quit on me, said I was hopeless. James, I said quietly, but my voice carried in the silence. You don't have to. Yes, I do. He looked at me with such gratitude it made my chest tight. Miss Foster rewrote entire math courses, created visual systems, turned numbers into stories. That's what teachers do, my father said weakly. No, that's what exceptional humans do. Victoria stood up at table 2. Dad, stop, please. I'm just saying, teaching is noble work. Noble? Mr. Harrison laughed, but it wasn't pleasant. Robert, do you know where your daughter went to college? State school. We offered to pay for better, but MIT. The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. That's not. Evelyn went to state, my father insisted. For undergraduate, MIT for her master's, mathematics education. Mr. Harrison pulled out his phone. I have her thesis right here, Adaptive Learning Methods for Neurodivergent Mathematics Students, published in 3 journals. I wanted to sink into the floor. This was too much, too public, too everything. Why didn't you tell me? My father's voice cracked, looking at me. Would it have mattered? The words escaped before I could stop them. Of course it would have. Of course it. Really? Because Victoria went to Harvard and I still got table 12. Someone at table 8 whispered, Oh, snap. That's different. Victoria's a lawyer. Making 300,000 a year, my father added, desperately trying to regain ground. Evelyn, Mr. Harrison said, looking at me directly, may I? I knew what he was asking. The envelope, the truth about everything. I thought about my students, about every time I'd told them to stand up for their worth. Slowly, I nodded. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Harrison announced, what I'm about to share is something Evelyn never wanted public. She's refused recognition for years, but after tonight's education on relative worth, I think it's time. He opened the envelope. This is a letter from my son, written 5 years ago. He began to read. Mom and Dad, I got into Harvard Law. The admission committee specifically mentioned my unique approach to quantitative analysis. That's Miss Foster's method. She didn't just teach me math, she taught me how to think. Tears were streaming down James's face now. Sarah held his hand. There's more, Mr. Harrison continued. Miss Foster spent over 3,000 hours with me, free for the first 2 years. When we insisted on paying, she asked for just $20 an hour. A master's from MIT, and she charged less than a high school student. When I asked why, she said education shouldn't be about money. 3,000 hours? Someone calculated aloud. That's years of work. But wait, my father interjected, desperate. If she's so exceptional, why is she at a public school? Because that's where I'm needed most. I stood up, finally. My voice was steady. Not everyone can afford private tutors, Dad. But the money isn't everything. Evelyn, Mr. Harrison said, tell them about your other students. No, I shook my head. This isn't about 3 other executives' children, all learning differences, all now in top universities. He looked around the room. She's the secret weapon parents whisper about, the teacher who can reach anyone. Then why didn't I know? My father's voice was small now. Because you never asked, Robert. Mr. Harrison's tone was ice. You were too busy measuring worth in dollars. The silence that followed was deafening. The ballroom remained frozen in that horrible silence. Then Mrs. Harrison stood up, and something about her movement commanded attention in a way that even her husband's CEO presence hadn't. Robert, she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd built an empire, there's something else you should know. My father looked like he wanted to disappear. I think we've heard enough. No, I don't think we have. She walked toward the microphone with deliberate grace. You see, when James told us he was getting married, he had one non-negotiable requirement for the wedding. James squeezed Sarah's hand, and I saw him mouth, "Mom, please." His favorite teacher had to be there, not just invited, actually there. He checked with the venue 3 times to make sure Miss Foster RSVP'd. That's touching, but, my father started. I'm not finished. Mrs. Harrison's voice could have cut glass. Do you know why my son, on his wedding day, cared more about his former teacher's attendance than his own extended family? She reached into her purse and pulled out another document. My heart sank. I knew what that was, too. 5 years ago, James was suicidal. The word landed like a bomb. Several people gasped. My father went white. Mom, James said weakly. No, sweetheart. This needs to be said. She looked at me with such warmth. Evelyn found him on the school roof, talked him down, spent 6 hours with him that night. That's confidential, I said quickly. Mrs. Harrison, please. You're right, but my son waived confidentiality tonight. She held up the paper. Because he wanted everyone to know that the woman his father's deputy CFO just humiliated saved his life. The room erupted in whispers. My father sank into his chair. But there's more, Mr. Harrison took over again. Evelyn never reported it officially, never sought recognition, never even told us until James did years later. She protected his privacy, his future career prospects, everything. Why? Someone asked from table 6. Everyone looked at me. I stayed silent. Because that's what great teachers do, Victoria said, standing again. They save lives quietly, without press releases or bonuses or corner offices. Evelyn, my mother spoke for the first time all evening. Is this true? I looked at James, who nodded permission. He's here today. That's all that matters. But the hours, the free tutoring, MIT, my father seemed to be processing everything at once. Why didn't you tell us? Would you have listened? I asked. Or would you have found a way to make it less than Victoria's achievements? That's not fair, isn't it? You introduced me tonight as just a teacher. With a sigh. Bless her heart, you said. I didn't mean, yes, you did. My voice stayed calm, professional, the voice I used with difficult parents. You've meant at every family gathering for 10 years. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. There's one more thing, Robert, the matter of compensation. Compensation? My father looked confused. For Evelyn's services, 3,000 hours of specialized tutoring. The going rate for an MIT graduate with her expertise is $300 per hour. Someone at table 4 did the math out loud. That's $900,000. Which Evelyn refused. She took $60,000 over 5 years, less than minimum wage for her qualifications. But, Mrs. Harrison added, we don't leave debts unpaid. Evelyn, would you please stand? I stayed seated. This isn't necessary. Stand up, Miss Foster. James's voice was firm. Please. Slowly I stood. The room's attention felt like a physical weight. Mr. Harrison pulled out a check. This is for $500,000. A consultation fee for the educational framework you developed. We're implementing it company-wide for employees' children with learning differences. I can't accept that. It's not charity, it's business. Your methodology has already helped 4 other executive families. The ROI is immeasurable. Evelyn, my father's voice was strangled. You're worth $500,000? No, Dad. I'm worth exactly what I've always been worth. You just never bothered to calculate it correctly. The room was silent again, but this silence felt different, charged, waiting. There's a contract too, Mr. Harrison continued, for ongoing consultation, another 100,000 annually, if you'll accept it. I looked at James, his tear-stained face beaming with pride. At Sarah, who I'd never met, but who looked at me with such gratitude. At the room full of people who'd pitied me an hour ago. Then I looked at my father. He seemed smaller somehow, shrunk by the weight of his own miscalculations. I need to think about it, I said finally. Of course. Mr. Harrison smiled. But Evelyn, the check isn't optional. It's already been processed through our foundation. Tax deductible. Legal. Irreversible. Someone started clapping, then another. Soon the entire ballroom was applauding, except for one table. Table 2, where my father sat in stunned silence. The applause died down, but my father wasn't finished. He stood up, his face flushed with a combination of embarrassment and anger. "This is ridiculous," he said loudly. "Evelyn, you're making me look like a fool." "No, Robert," Mr. Harrison's voice was steel. "You did that yourself." "She's my daughter. I have a right to—" "To what? Humiliate her? Diminish her achievements?" I was being realistic. Teaching doesn't pay. Enough! The voice that cut through was mine. I'd used it maybe 3 times in my entire teaching career, the voice that could silence a cafeteria full of teenagers. "Dad, sit down." He stared at me, shocked. "I said sit down." He sat. "For 32 years I've let you narrate my story. Poor Evelyn, not smart enough for law school. Poor Evelyn, settling for teaching. Poor Evelyn, needing her sister to take care of her." I walked toward the center of the room, my heels clicking on the marble. "Do you know what I did last week?" Silence. "I taught a girl with severe dyslexia how to read her first complete novel. She cried. Her mother cried. I cried." I turned to face the room. "The week before, I helped a boy everyone called stupid get into engineering school." "That's very nice, but—" "I'm not finished." I faced my father directly. "You want to talk ROI? Fine, let's talk numbers. In 10 years, I've taught over 2,000 students. Statistically, I've taught future doctors, lawyers, engineers, artists, parents, leaders. What's the value of that?" "It's not the same as— As what? As Victoria's billable hours?" I laughed, but it wasn't bitter, just tired. "Do you know what Victoria told me last week?" My sister stood up. "Evelyn, you don't have to—" "She said she defends corporations from lawsuits, makes them richer, and she's brilliant at it." I smiled at my sister with genuine love. "But I teach humans how to think. Which one changes the world?" "Both," Victoria said firmly. "Both matter." "Exactly, both, not one more than the other." My father tried again. "I never said teaching didn't matter. Table 12, Dad. You put me at table 12. The seating was random." "Stop lying!" The words exploded out. "You requested the seating personally. The venue coordinator confirmed it." Gasps rippled through the crowd. "You wanted me far enough away that you wouldn't have to explain me to your colleagues. The teacher, daughter. The disappointment." "Evelyn, please." "No! We're doing this. Here. Now. In front of everyone. Just like you wanted." I pulled out my phone. "Should I read the text you sent Mom?" "Keep Evelyn away from the Harrison table. Don't want to explain her job." My mother's face crumbled. "Robert, you didn't." "It was taken out of context." The context was crystal clear. I put my phone away. "But here's what you didn't know. Mr. Harrison requested I sit at his table. I declined. Said families should sit together." Mr. Harrison nodded. "She insisted on table 12. Said she didn't want to cause drama." "But you caused it anyway, Dad. With your toast, your comments, your constant, relentless disappointment." "I'm proud of you." "No, you're proud of Victoria. You're embarrassed by me." "That's not true." "Then why didn't you know about MIT, about James, about any of it?" "You never told me." "I tried. Graduation day, 2018. You asked if I was finally going to get a real job." He fell silent. "Christmas 2019. I mentioned tutoring a struggling student. You said, 'At least Victoria's thriving.' I didn't mean—" "Easter 2020. Mom asked about my work. You changed the subject to Victoria's engagement." "Stop." His voice was broken now. "Please stop." "Why?" Because it's uncomfortable? Because you're embarrassed? I walked closer to him. This is how I've felt every family gathering for a decade. Evelyn, my mother stood up. That's enough. Is it? Because I have 10 years of enough. 10 years of being less than. 10 years of apologies for my career. 10 years of bless her heart. The room was riveted. This was better than any reality show. You want to know the truth, Dad? The complete truth? I looked him straight in the eye. I make 80,000 a year from school, another 60 from private tutoring, plus the consultation work I never told you about. I own my condo outright. I have no debt. I take 2 vacations a year. I love my life. Then why didn't you say? Because it shouldn't matter. My worth shouldn't be measured in dollars. But that's all you see. That's not… James, I called out. What did your father offer me last year? James looked at his father, who nodded. A position at Harrison Technologies, Director of Learning Development, 300,000 to start. The room inhaled collectively. And, I prompted, you turned it down. Why? Because you said your students needed you more than executives needed another director. I turned back to my father. Still think I lack ambition? Wow, if you're still watching, your heart is probably racing like mine was that night. I know what it's like to have your worth questioned by the people who should support you most. If you've ever been there, leave a heart in the comments. Let's show each other we're not alone. And please, if this story is resonating with you, hit that subscribe button. We need more stories about standing up for our worth, whatever our profession. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their job matters. Now, let's see what happened when the truth finally came out. Mr. Harrison returned to the microphone, the envelope still in his hand, but now he pulled out something else. A thick, legal document. Ladies and gentlemen, forgive the interruption to my son's wedding, but sometimes truth needs witnesses. He looked directly at my father. Robert, you've worked for me for 15 years. You're good with numbers. So let me share some numbers with you. My father stood frozen, his face pale. Evelyn Foster has directly impacted 4 executive families in this room. He pointed to different tables. The Chens, the Weathertons, the Morettis, and us. Mrs. Chen from my table stood up. My grandson, Kevin. He's at Stanford now. Engineering. Evelyn taught him for 3 years. Mr. Weatherton stood next. Our daughter Emma. She has severe ADHD. Evelyn created an entire learning system for her. She's pre-med at Johns Hopkins. The Morettis stood. Our son Marco, autistic. Every tutor said college was impossible. He graduated MIT last year. Because of her. But here's the real kicker, Robert, Mr. Harrison continued. Do you know what Evelyn charged these families? Silence. Between $20 and $40 an hour, for expertise worth 10 times that, because she scales her pricing based on need, not market value. That's bad business, my father said weakly. Is it? Let's do the math you love so much. Mr. Harrison pulled out his phone. 4 families, average executive compensation, $2 million. Their children were failing. Without intervention, no college, no careers, generational wealth lost. Evelyn's intervention? Maybe 50,000 total across all families. The return? Priceless. You can't quantify. I can and I will. Kevin Chen just patented 3 innovations. Emma Weatherton is heading to medical school. Marco Moretti works for NASA. And James is about to make partner at 28, youngest in his firm's history. James stood up again. And I need to say something else. Miss Foster didn't just save my academic career. She saved my life, literally. James, you don't have to, I started. I do, because Mr. Foster needs to understand what he's been dismissing. He looked at my father. Your daughter found me on the school roof. I was 17. I'd failed another test. My parents had spent hundreds of thousands on tutors. I thought I was broken. The room was completely still. She didn't call security, didn't make a scene. She sat with me for 6 hours, She told me about famous people with learning differences: Einstein, Richard Branson. She said my brain wasn't broken, just different, like having a Mac in a PC world. Tears were flowing freely down many faces now. She met me the next day, and the next, every day for 2 weeks, just talking. Then she started teaching me her way: visual mathematics, story problems, color coding. My brain understood for the first time. But she's not a special education teacher, my father protested weakly. No, she's better. She's someone who sees potential where others see problems. James looked at me. Miss Foster, may I? I nodded, though I wasn't sure what he was asking. He pulled out his own envelope. This is my Harvard Law acceptance letter. But more importantly, this is the recommendation letter that got me in. From Evelyn? Someone asked. No, from the dean of MIT's mathematics department, about Evelyn's teaching methodology. He called her a revolutionary educator whose techniques should be standard practice. Mr. Harrison took over again. Which brings me to this document. Evelyn, I know you said you need to think about it, but I want everyone to see what we're offering. He held up the contract. Harrison Technologies is creating the Foster Method Learning Institute. $5 million in initial funding. Evelyn as founding director. Her techniques will be taught to educators nationwide. The room exploded in gasps and exclamations. 5 million? My father's voice cracked. To start, we project it'll help thousands of students with learning differences. Mr. Harrison looked at me. Evelyn, you've been hiding your light under a bushel. That ends tonight. I don't want, I began. Fame? Glory? I know. But what about impact? What about the thousands of students who need what you can teach their teachers? I stood there, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. This wasn't what I'd wanted. I just wanted to teach, to help, to make a difference one student at a time. Evelyn, Mrs. Harrison said gently, you saved our son. Let us help you save others. The check, Mr. Harrison held it up. 500,000, already cleared, and the Institute will do it with or without you. But it would be better with you. My father finally found his voice. Evelyn, I didn't know any of it. Because you didn't want to know, Dad. Teaching was never enough for you. I was wrong. 3 words. 3 words I'd never thought I'd hear. I was so wrong, he continued, his voice breaking. You're not the disappointing daughter. I'm the disappointing father. The room held its breath, waiting for my response. I stood in the center of that glittering ballroom, $500,000 check being held out to me, my father's apology hanging in the air, and 200 people waiting to see what Evelyn Foster, just a teacher, would do. I walked to Mr. Harrison and took the check. The room seemed to exhale collectively. Thank you, I said simply. This will help a lot of students. What about the Institute? He pressed. I looked around the room, at the executives who'd hidden their children's struggles, at my sister who'd always supported me, at my parents who'd never understood me, at James whose life had intersected with mine in ways that changed us both. I'll consult, I said finally, but I won't leave my school. Evelyn, Mr. Harrison started, those kids need me, the ones whose parents can't afford private tutors, the ones who'll never meet a CEO willing to fund their education, the forgotten kids. I folded the check carefully. This money? It's going to create a scholarship fund at Lincoln High. Free tutoring for any student who needs it. All of it, my father gasped. All of it. But that's $500,000. Yes, Dad. It is. And it'll change more lives than I ever could alone. Victoria walked over and took my hand. I'll help with the legal structure. Pro bono. Of course you will, I squeezed her hand. Because that's what we do. We help. Mr. Harrison smiled. Then let me add to it. Harrison Technologies will match your donation. $1 million for the Evelyn Foster Learning Fund. The room erupted in applause. But I wasn't done. Dad, I said, turning to my father. I accept your apology, but I need you to understand something. This doesn't change who I am. Tomorrow, I'll still be a teacher. I'll still make 80,000 a year. I'll still drive my Honda Civic. And that has to be enough for you. Evelyn, it has to be enough, or we can't have a relationship. I won't spend another decade defending my choices. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. It's enough. You're enough. You've always been enough. I was just too blind to see it. And Mom, I turned to my mother. No more excuses for him. No more, that's just how he is. No more enabling the comparisons. I understand, she whispered. Good, because I'm setting boundaries. I'll come to family events, but the moment anyone suggests I'm less than Victoria, I leave. No arguments, no explanations, I just leave. That seems harsh, someone from my extended family started. No, it's healthy. Something I should have done years ago. James approached. Miss Foster, there's one more thing. James, no more, please. This isn't a gift, it's a request. He pulled out a card. My firm wants to hire you. I'm not a lawyer. As a consultant, we have 3 associates with learning disabilities. They're brilliant but struggling. 1 hour a week. Video calls are fine. The rate is $500 an hour. That's ridiculous. That's the standard rate for specialized consultants. Yes or no? I looked at this young man who'd once stood on a roof, ready to end everything. Now a Harvard lawyer, married, successful, alive. 1 hour a week. No more. Deal. He hugged me again. You saved my life, Miss Foster. Let me help you save others. The band, which had been silent through all of this, started playing again. People began moving, talking, processing what they'd witnessed. My father approached tentatively. Evelyn, can we talk? Privately? No. No. No more private shame, Dad. No more public pride and private disappointment. If you have something to say it here. He swallowed hard. I'm proud of you. Not because of the money or the recognition. Because you stood up to me. Because you're changing lives. Because you're you. That's a start, I said. But Dad, it's going to take time. Years of damage doesn't disappear with one apology. I understand. I don't think you do. But maybe someday you will. Mr. Harrison approached with the contract. The Institute offer stands. Whenever you're ready. I'll think about it. But Mr. Harrison? The next time you hear someone dismiss teachers, remember tonight. I'll do more than remember. I'll correct them. Good. The wedding reception continued around us, but something had fundamentally shifted. The executives who'd pitied me an hour ago now approached with business cards, asking about tutoring for their children. The relatives who'd whispered about poor Evelyn now wanted to know about my methods, but I wasn't interested in their sudden approval. I'd learned something valuable that night. My worth had never depended on their recognition. It had always been there, in every student I'd helped, every life I'd touched, every mind I'd opened. Evelyn, Victoria said, appearing at my elbow. You okay? I'm perfect, I said, and meant it. The next 3 months changed everything, and nothing. I returned to Lincoln High on Monday morning, same Honda Civic, same parking spot, same classroom. But the email waiting in my inbox was different. Evelyn Foster Learning Fund, established, initial funding $1,000. By lunch, word had spread. Not through me, I'd said nothing, but James had posted on LinkedIn, my teacher saved my life, now she's saving others. It went viral, 3 million views in 48 hours. My principal called me in. Evelyn, is this real? The fund? Yes. $1 million? For our students? Free tutoring for anyone who needs it. We can hire 10 part-time tutors, create a resource center, buy adaptive learning technology. She stopped me with tears in her eyes. Do you know what this means? Half our kids struggle with learning differences. Half. I know. That's why I'm doing it. The ripple effects were immediate. 17 families contacted the school that first week asking about the program, but more importantly, my current students looked at me differently. Miss Foster, one said, you turned down being a director to stay with us? Where else would I be? But the money. Money isn't everything, Marcus. Remember that. At home, the changes were subtler but deeper. My father called every day for 2 weeks. I answered none of them. On day 15, he left a voicemail. I enrolled in a workshop, Understanding and Appreciating Educators. I'm trying, Evelyn. I'm really trying. I texted back. Trying is a start. Victoria and I grew closer. She'd always supported me, but now she actively defended me. At a family dinner I didn't attend, she apparently told our aunts, Evelyn's impact on the world is greater than mine will ever be. I help corporations. She helps humans. The professional opportunities were overwhelming. 7 school districts wanted me to train their teachers. 12 private tutoring companies offered positions starting at $200,000. A tech startup wanted to build an app based on my methods. I turned them all down, except one, a nonprofit that worked with underserved communities. I agreed to conduct free monthly workshops for their teachers. You're leaving money on the table, my accountant said. I'm leaving money where it doesn't matter to take purpose where it does. 3 months after the wedding, my father showed up at Lincoln High. Security called me. There's a Robert Foster here. Says he's your father? Send him to room 203. He entered my classroom tentatively, like a student late for class. He looked older, humbler. Your principal gave me a tour, he said. The learning center you're building, it's impressive. It's necessary. I met 3 of your students in the hall. They spoke about you like you're a hero. I'm their teacher. Same thing, apparently. He pulled out an envelope. I wanted to give you this. Dad, I don't want... It's not money. Just read it. I opened it after he left. It was a letter to his company newsletter. My daughter is a teacher. She makes $80,000 a year and she's the most successful person I know. Success isn't measured in dollars but in lives changed. Evelyn has changed thousands. I've changed spreadsheets. She wins. He'd signed it Robert Foster, proud father of a teacher. I called him that night. Dad? Evelyn? His voice was hopeful. Sunday dinner. I'll be there. Really? Really. But Dad, the first comparison to Victoria, I leave. There won't be any. You're incomparable. Both of you. In different ways. The Evelyn Foster Learning Fund officially launched 6 months after the wedding. The first student we helped was a girl with dyslexia who'd been told she'd never read above a 3rd grade level. 6 months later, she read her first young adult novel. Her mother sent me a video of her crying, holding the book. I finished it. Miss Foster's tutors helped me finish it. That video was worth more than any check. James made partner at 28, as predicted. His first act was establishing a pro bono program for students with learning disabilities facing school disciplinary actions. He named it the Foster Initiative. Mr. Harrison's institute moved forward without me as director, but with my methods at its core. They've trained 300 teachers so far. Each one reaches approximately 100 students per year. The math, 30,000 students impacted annually, would make my father proud. Speaking of my father, he kept his word. No more comparisons, no more disappointments. At last month's family gathering, someone asked what I did for a living. She teaches, my father said, his voice full of genuine pride. She shapes futures, she saves lives, she changes the world, one student at a time. That must be rewarding, they responded. For her and for everyone lucky enough to know her. Victoria caught my eye across the room and smiled. We'd both won in our own ways. But the real victory was smaller, quieter. It was Marcus, my struggling sophomore, finally understanding quadratic equations. It was Emma, who'd been told she was too slow, getting into her dream college. It was every student who walked into my classroom believing they couldn't and walked out knowing they could. That's the thing about teaching. The ROI can't be calculated in dollars. It compounds over generations. 6 months after that wedding changed everything, I stood in my classroom at 3 p.m., the same time I'd stood there every day for 10 years. But now, the walls were covered with thank you letters from students, photos from the Learning Center, and a framed copy of that LinkedIn post that started it all. A knock at my door interrupted my grading. It was my father, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need caffeine," he said. "Teachers work late, right?" "We do." I accepted the coffee. "Thanks, Dad." He sat in a student desk, his knees comically high. "I've been thinking about what you said, about boundaries. And? You were right. I spent so many years measuring worth wrong. I measured in dollars when I should have measured in difference. That's a start. Evelyn, I need to tell you something. I've been seeing a therapist." I nearly dropped my coffee. "You? Therapy?" "Your mother insisted after the wedding, said I needed to understand why I couldn't see your value. And? Turns out, my father did the same to me. I was an accountant. He wanted a doctor. Never good enough." He looked at me with wet eyes. I repeated the cycle. "I'm sorry. I know you are. But knowing and healing are different things, aren't they?" "They are." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then he said, "Your learning center helped 43 students this semester. 47. 47 kids who might have failed without you. Without the center. It's not just me anymore. But it started with you. One teacher who refused to give up on a kid everyone else had written off. That's the job, Dad." "No, Evelyn. That's a calling." 3 years have passed since that wedding. The Evelyn Foster Learning Fund has helped over 300 students. 12 have gone to Ivy League schools, 23 to state universities, 15 to trade schools, all to futures they couldn't have imagined without help. My salary is still $80,000 from Lincoln High. I take $30,000 annually from the consulting work, just enough to cover the mortgage I'd already been paying. The rest goes back to the fund. You could be rich, people tell me. I am rich, I respond, just not in the way you measure. My relationship with my father has healed slowly, carefully. We have dinner once a month. He asks about my students. I ask about his work. We don't compare. We don't compete. We just exist, father and daughter, each valuable in our own way. Last week, he brought me a gift, a framed photo from that wedding. Not of the confrontation, but of the moment after, when I stood surrounded by parents thanking me for helping their children. In the corner, barely visible, is my father, watching with an expression I'd never seen before, understanding. "I had this moment," he said, "when I finally got it. You were never the disappointing daughter. I was the disappointed father, disappointed in my own narrow view of success. Dad, let me finish. You asked me once if it would have mattered if I'd known about MIT, about James, about all of it. The truth? It shouldn't have mattered. You were always enough, Evelyn. Teaching 5-year-olds to read or teaching CEOs' kids calculus, both matter. I see that now. Thank you. No, thank you. For standing up to me, for setting boundaries, for showing me what real success looks like." Victoria and I talk every week now. She left corporate law last year to start a nonprofit legal clinic. "You inspired me," she said. "Making partners richer wasn't fulfilling. Helping people is." "Dad must be thrilled," I joked. "Actually, he is. He told me to follow my purpose, not my paycheck." "Who is this man and what did he do with our father? You changed him, Maddie. You changed all of us." The foster method is now taught in 17 school districts. I train teachers on weekends, for free if they work in underserved areas, for a fee if they're private schools. The balance works. James sends me updates on every case where he helps a student with learning differences. His latest, a boy with ADHD who was being expelled for behavioral issues that were actually symptoms. James got him an IEP instead. The boy is thriving now. You taught me that different doesn't mean less than, James wrote. Now I teach others. That's the real ROI of teaching. It multiplies exponentially. Every student you reach reaches others. The impact ripples outward, immeasurable but undeniable. My boundaries remain firm but fair. I don't tolerate disrespect for my profession, but I welcome genuine curiosity about it. I've learned that my worth isn't determined by others' opinions, but by my own knowledge of the difference I make. To those who say, just a teacher, I say, yes, I am. And that's exactly what the world needs. If you've made it this far in my story, you probably know someone who's been undervalued for their career choice. Share this with them. Tell them their work matters. And if you're that person, the one whose family doesn't understand your calling, whose passion doesn't translate to impressive salaries, know this. Your worth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in the lives you touch, the differences you make, the world you slowly, steadily change. That wedding 3 years ago? It wasn't about vindication or revenge, it was about truth. And the truth is simple. Every honest profession has dignity. Every person who serves others has value. And sometimes, the smallest salaries do the biggest work. I'm Evelyn Foster. I'm a teacher, and that's more than enough. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If my story resonated with you, I'd love to hear about your own experiences. What work do you do that others might undervalue? Drop a comment below. I read every single one, and your stories inspire me to keep sharing. If you believe every profession deserves respect, please share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe and hit the bell for more stories about standing up for your worth and setting healthy boundaries. Remember, you are not your paycheck. You are the difference you make. Until next time, keep changing the world in your own way.